Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. This is an educational channel and we've been going through a series of Bible decodes from the New Testament, and we've been working out this Roman origins hypothesis for the New Testament, in particular the Gospels, and we've been looking at the work of Michael Menescotz, M-E-N-A-S-G-O-T-Z, who has a new book out that's called Christianity's Origins as a Flavian Secrecy Cult. You may know that the Flavians are the dynasty of Caesars that ruled the Roman Empire from 69 to 96 AD. That includes Emperor Vespasian, Emperor Titus, his son, and his younger son, Emperor Domitian. And both Vespasian and Titus were also generals in the War of the Jews. This was the war that the Romans fought against the Jews from 66 to 73 AD. And that whole episode was written up by a person that went under the name of Josephus, who wrote a book called War of the Jews, or Jewish War. And the connection here is that if you look at the military campaign of Titus, now Titus eventually becomes the emperor, but at this point, from 70 to 73 AD, he is the military general. Now this is after Vespasian was named the new emperor in 69 AD. He was called in by Emperor Nero to quell the revolt in Jerusalem of the Jews, and he fought there for 3 years. And then when he was made the new emperor after Nero and 3 other Roman emperors were assassinated, then Titus took control of the military in Judea and the siege of Jerusalem, among other places. Now, if you follow Josephus's work and look at the military campaign of Titus, he goes to various places and has various adventures or battles or episodes that occur in during his 3-year military campaign. And then if you go to the New Testament, you will find, in particular, the book of Luke, you will find that the 3-year ministry of Jesus in Judea from 30 to 33 AD matches perfectly the 3-year military campaign of Titus. Every place that Titus goes, Jesus goes, in the same order. And the events that Titus participates in are the same events conceptually that Jesus participates in. They're not exactly the same events, but conceptually there are parallel characteristics of the events between Jesus and Titus. Now, you can say that, oh, well, his events occurred 40 years before Titus's. Well, this is also another parallel. Jesus and Titus both go to the same places in the same order, and the events are separated by 40 years exactly, sometimes to the very hour of each other. The kind of problem with the thinking that Titus copied Jesus is that Titus, his military campaign describes events that actually occurred. that can be corroborated by other evidence, archaeological evidence or other accounts, as far as I know. Josephus wrote a history, whereas the New Testament is not, considered to be a history. Also, there are many other parallels that also the book of Luke and even the other two synoptic gospels, Matthew and Mark, it's conceded by most scholars that these were not written until the 70s or 80s AD. So, even though they depict events that occurred in the 30s, they were not actually written until much, much, much later. Okay, now what Menescats does, now there are many other themes of the parallels between the Jewish War, or War of the Jews, and the New Testament, in particular the book of Luke. And that's what Menescats does. He goes into the book of Luke and tries to find parallels. And he found over 250 of them in the book of Luke. And some of them are really intricate, detailed, and well hidden. Some of them are almost kind of passing in the night and relatively trivial. And some of them are kind of in between. But, the ones that are trivial and even the ones that are in between are kind of like, well, you could dismiss them as coincidences. But given the fact that there are hundreds of them, then you can recognize that there was some intention involved. And the intention, in general, the motive for the Romans to be doing this is because they had taken over in Judea way back in 63 BC. And for 130 years, 140 years almost, they were just having trouble managing the Jews. The Jews were people who, had this zealous and jealous God who called them the chosen people. So they were very xenophobic. They didn't want to mix with other people, but they were conquered by the Romans, among other people before that. And they had a long list of rituals that they had to keep up, circumcision, kosher food laws, animal sacrifice laws, strictures against graven images. And these things were all things that the Jews were willing to die for, to maintain these rituals. And that cut against the Roman interest. The Romans had hundreds of other nations under their, or tribes or nations under their empire. And their basic plan was to basically absorb the culture and the religion of these other people. Not to stamp it out, but just to recognize it and then, incorporate it in this polytheistic kind of mishmash of all the different gods. We respect all of them. We celebrate all of them. Almost every day of the year was a different celebration for some group or another under the Roman Empire. And the Romans wanted to absorb the Jews and other groups, but they also wanted to put a statue of Caesar, in your temple or wherever, in your holy place. And the Jews couldn't go for that because of this graven images thing. So, for other reasons. And so, life with the Jews and the Romans was one of constant revolt, revolution, uprising, riot, and outright war. And the Jews were waiting for a Messiah. There were a number of prophets of the Old Testament who predicted the existence of a new Messiah coming for the Jews to help them. And the Messiah that they were waiting for was a military leader. They were waiting for somebody who was going to help the Jews kick out the Romans, kick them out of Judea. And that literally happened in 66 AD. The Jewish zealots named Simon, John, and Eleazar, according to Josephus's account, they literally, rose up with, followers, and they kicked out the Herod kings from Jerusalem. And the Herods were basically a dynasty of Roman puppets that they had installed in Judea, starting in, I think, like 37 BC. That was Herod the Great. But then there were a bunch of Herods after him. And the Herods fled to Rome. Nero called in General Vespasian. And so it took Vespasian and Titus like 7 years to quell the revolt. And Titus and Vespasian were both wounded as part of this war. So they were kind of like, I've kind of had enough of these Jews. I think what we should try to do is we should try to prune the Jews or domesticate the Jews, to tame the Jews, to mellow the Jews out. And so what we need to do is we need to propose a Jewish Messiah who is a Prince of Peace, and one who believes in turning the other cheek to oppression, one who believes in walking an extra mile with the Roman soldiers' pack, one who believes in rendering unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and in calling the Roman slave owner, his faith is the greatest faith in all of Israel, and to exhort his God to forgive the Romans, for they know not what they do, while at the very same time going outside the temple and overturning the tables of the Jewish money changers who were out there turning the Roman money with graven images on it into Jewish money so it could be taken inside the temple for the offering, and disrupting the commerce of the Jews who are out there selling animals, doves and pigeons, rams for the animal sacrifice rituals in the temple. So Jesus is directly interfering with the Jewish rituals while at the same time being completely deferential to the Romans. So that is what a Messiah would look like if the Romans had created it. And the Romans also had the method of operation, the MO. The Romans created several other religions in the first century. Emperor Titus himself created at least 2 other religions, if not really 3 other religions, during his really like 2+ year long reign. So the Flavians created a handful of other religions for the same reason: psychological operation and psychological warfare. Not only that, but the Gospels are written in Greek, one of the main languages of the Romans, along with Latin. The elite spoke Latin and wrote in Latin, but pretty much everybody understood and read in Greek, where the ones that, literacy was only 15% in Rome, whereas it was only 5% in Judea. And in Judea, Jesus and his disciples would have been speaking in Aramaic, and very, very few of them would have been literate in Greek. Now, the Romans speculatively designed the Gospels as really plays that they would perform in front of the Jews, in front of the Gentiles as well, the slaves and the soldiers, for the purposes of social control. And because so many people were illiterate that, publishing the Gospels isn't going to have the kind of effect that they are going to want it to unless it's kind of performed out there. Also, the Romans had a monopoly on censorship. Nothing is going to be published in the Roman Empire unless Caesar approves of it, which he greatly approved of War of the Jews. Titus gave his strong endorsement of the book War of the Jews, and the Gospels also got out there. The Romans had a monopoly on publishing, meaning that they are the only group of people who had thousands of slaves who had the job of copying texts over and over and over and over again. And the Romans also had a monopoly on distribution. They had the only postal service in the Roman Empire. So all of these things point to a Roman origins hypothesis for the New Testament. But then when Michael Menescot finds his 250 parallels between the book of Luke and Josephus's War of the Jews. Now what you have to understand is that Josephus is known as Flavius Josephus. Josephus was a member of the Roman royal family. He was a member of the Flavian dynasty of Caesars. He was an adopted member, but a member nonetheless. He lived at Caesar's palace in a townhouse, and he was one of the court historians for the Romans. And whoever Josephus was, he also wrote the Gospels. Because there are too many parallels between the two, and they parody or parallel each other. So it's not just a one-way, that you could say, oh, well, the Gospels is being parodied by Josephus. In many cases, the Gospels are actually parodying Josephus. And Menescot makes that distinction. But what he found out is he took the 250 parallels and he graphed them out on a chart. He put the book of Luke on the vertical axis. He put the War of the Jews on the horizontal axis. And every place he found a parallel, he put a dot in the corresponding location on the chart. After plotting out all 250 plus points, he found that he had made 5 near-perfect letters in Latin, the language of the Roman royals, APTVS. Not quite sure about the A and the P, but we will discover that the A and the P may be actually separate from the T, the V, and the S, which stands for Titus Vespasian, or Vespasianus, and was literally used in the imprints on the Roman coins, on many Roman coins during this very time period. So it's not like the TVS that you're just like, oh, well, yeah, we'll say that's Titus and Vespasian. They actually used that same moniker, the same letters on their coins. So, it's hardly even debatable. So basically, the Romans did not only write the Gospels, but they literally signed their names to them. And so if you think that's still a coincidence, then I'm guessing that you're not following the Q project, because it goes way beyond anything like that. Okay, now let's listen to Menescot's here. He goes over many of these parallels one at a time. Right now we're in the parallels. You can see the APTVS diagram in the thumbnail for the video, but right now he's working on the right-hand side of the A, the diagonal line that is, as you go forward in War of the Jews, you are going backward in the book of Luke. And as he mentions, the parallels, and you can see it on the graph, the parallels in the A and the P are not nearly as strong, well-developed, well-detailed, intricate, and well-hidden as the ones in the, say, in the V and the S. The T's kind of in the middle, but it seems like the A and the P was kind of slapped together later, whereas the V and the S was put together slowly with great care. And actually a decent amount of genius, even though you could definitely say it's evil genius. Now, the Romans were extremely mean-spirited and mocking with all of these different parallels. And so it's, you know, you can imagine that they were laughing at the Jews, and really that they are laughing at anybody who still believes in this. Okay, so we're going to start here. I will now conclude with the remaining parallels in the straight line forming the right-hand side of the A. Again, as we continue working forwards through Jewish war, the parallels in Luke are appearing in reverse order. So Jewish War 142, Book 1, Chapter 21, Paragraph 6. The place by the sea where he built was unsuitable, so he worked very hard to overcome that difficulty so that its firmness would resist the waves of the sea. And this is matched up with Luke 6:48. He is like a man which built a house and dug deep and laid the foundation on a rock. And when the flood arose, the flood waters could not shake it, for it was founded upon a rock. So really, we're talking about resisting the waves of the sea and of the flood waters, and you know, a man who builds something. Okay, Jewish war. So, you know, it's a dot, but it's not a strong parallel. It could easily be a coincidence if it were just by itself. But if it's with hundreds of others, then the chances of it being a coincidence are, you know, diminish beyond the vanishing point, beyond, you know, 3, 4, 5, 6 standard deviations. Okay, this is Jewish War 143. Now, in this harbor that Herod built, there were arches where the mariners or fishermen dwelt, a large valley or walk for a quay or landing place to those that came on shore. So Herod dedicated the haven to the sailors there. Matched up with Luke 5:1. And he stood by the lake of Gennesaret. Matthew and Mark add in here that Jesus walked by the shore, okay, and saw 2 ships standing by the lake, but the fishermen were gone. Okay, well, walking by the shore, and a lot of times that, you know, the synoptic gospels, Matthew and Mark, add to Luke. So sometimes you do have to get a piece of additional information from Matthew and Mark, as well as getting additional information from what he calls the synoptic Josephus, which includes his autobiography and also his very large work that is called Antiquities of the Jews. Okay, this is Jewish War 145. Herod also greatly loved his father, for he made a monument to him, in the form of a city which had rivers and trees in abundance, and named the city Antipatris, meaning for forefather. And he also built a wall around a citadel and dedicated it to his mother. This is Luke 3:23, which sets out Jesus' family tree, including his father and all his forefathers. That's kind of a reach, I would say. Okay, Jewish War 146. And likewise, Herod built a memorial for himself, a fortress called Herodium, a perfectly circular man-made hill, also became Herod's tomb eventually. He arranged it on a hill that was the shape of a woman's breast. Luke 3:19. Herod the Tetrarch shut up John in prison. When all the people were baptized, the Holy Ghost descended in a bodily shape like a dove upon John, meaning a convex shape like a breast, is what he's saying. It is expanded on in Acts 11, describing the shape as like a great sheet descending, being lowered down by four corners. Okay. Not terribly happy with that one either. Jewish War 149. In one day, Herod caught 40 wild animals. And men have stood amazed at Herod's readiness in his exercises. And fortune was very favorable to Herod. And if he failed, this was only ever when Herod was betrayed. Luke 2:8 and a few succeeding verses in Luke 2. This tells how shepherds came, people who keep a flock of animals. The glory of the Lord shone around, and they were sore afraid. Instead of shepherds, Matthew and Mark instead describe magi who betrayed Herod. I hardly see any type of parallels there. I mean, a shepherd, as opposed to killing 40 animals, or not killing, catching 40 animals. Standing amazed is about the only real, and betrayal. So standing amazed and betrayal, and they both are about Herod, the betrayal of Herod. So, okay, I can see a parallel there. Sometimes the parallels are really well hidden. But again, this is in the A, and so a lot of the parallels in the A are much weaker than the ones in the V and the S. Jewish War 151. Mariam, also known as Mary, that's one of Herod's, actually two of Herod's wives were named Mariam. Miriam, I don't know how to pronounce it, but she had a brother called Aristobulus. Herod had given him the high priesthood at the age of 17, but killed him soon afterwards, since the crowds fell into tears when he wore the holy clothes at the altar at a festival. Upon this, the child was sent to Jericho and drowned in a pool. So I guess that is the method that Herod killed Aristobulus, the 17-year-old. This is matched up with Luke 1:76. John, the child of Mary's cousin, who is later baptized and baptizes, meaning being put in water, and who wore no clothes, shall be called the prophet of the highest. And the child was in the deserts till the day of his showing. So we're talking about a high priest or a prophet of the highest being put in water, and with the name of Mary also involved, and about the clothes that they are wearing. Again, not a terribly strong parallel, but I think certainly enough to put a dot there. You know, you really have to be looking for that to find it, though. Now, there are many parallels that are, you know, very strong as well. But again, we're in the weak area of the chart right now. Okay, now he puts in the new set of parallels. Now it's interesting that the right-hand side of the A, the line is quite straight. And, you know, it puts them in there in green. Now the black lines, the black dots are where Josephus is parodying the Gospels, and the blue dots are where the Gospels are parodying Josephus. Okay, while each parallel is generally less impressive and also lacking the thematic coherence of the parallels found in the second half of Jewish War, it remains the case that the most notable parallels in this region preferentially align to this straight diagonal line. In summary, this entire section of Jewish War had to be written to evoke concepts found in Luke, but in reverse order. It is the precision with which the right-hand side of the A is formed that is important, and in the next chapter, I will use this to show that the parallels cannot be coincidences, and that the APTVS pattern cannot be the result of me choosing from a larger pool of available coincidental parallels. Okay, so that is the end of the chapter, and I think we'll stop it right there for today and start up the next chapter tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you come back for tomorrow's Decode. And again, you can get a copy of Josephus online, and you can verify these things for yourself. You can get a PDF for free, and you know, go over it and see whether you get a sense of deja vu reading Josephus. And please hit that like button, share and subscribe, and comment as you see fit. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day.